Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly ag weather forecast for AgSouth Farm Credit. I want to start you off with a bit of an overview of what we're going to cover. We've got a lot of severe weather and flooding in the midsection of the country. You can even see these storms we just saw yesterday ripping off in the midsection of the United States, including, look at this large dust storm that's coming out of New Mexico into Texas, including some wildfire smoke out of Mexico. Well, we're going to take this and try to figure out where the pattern's going in the near term, where the flooding will be, and how dry we're going to be in parts of the southeast with this current setup. We'll stretch this out into a longer term outlook throughout the month of May, comparing some of the different models. And then I'm going to ask a question I've not asked in the last several weeks of doing these longer range forecast videos for you. And that is about a scenario that could set up in the western United States that just needs to be monitored carefully. We'll finish it up with a bit of a discussion about South America and give you a global perspective and even some wildfire information coming out of Australia. So we got a lot ahead of us here. Let's dig into it. I left you on this particular stopping point in the animation to show you the flow. It's doing this. These next few systems are rounding the base of this broader trough. They're ejecting into the central United States and they're rolling straight to the Great Lakes, Ontario, and eventually into the Canadian Maritimes. They are not digging. And the reason I bring that up is because each of these storm systems is not in the right position to be delivering rain to the southeast, which means we're going to go on a bit of a drier stretch as we go forward. Now, these have been pretty nasty. Just looking back over the last 24 hours, we've had 113 reports of severe weather, a lot of hail and straight line wind damage, and 6 reports of tornadoes. And those storms continue. Just taking a look at the last 72 hours of total accumulated precipitation here, well, we had some very light precipitation in parts of the Carolinas. Most of Georgia has been dry. All the wet weather is tucked away in the midsection of the United States, and that's where our storms continue to roll through this morning. Just taking a look at some of the lightning data, we have severe storms through Oklahoma early this morning. But these are not getting to us. They're not going to make it. And you can see that by watching the animation. Last 18 hours of radar data, it's pretty clear that these storm systems are lifting through the country, meaning they're moving toward the north and east and not digging, delivering rain into our part of the country. Now, I just want to show you one thing, though. This is kind of fun. Looking at yesterday's satellite data, it was fun to watch the sea breeze right here along the coast of Carolinas and Georgia. I know those of you that live down here, you see this all the time, but it's anything I don't get where I live in Illinois. And some of these blew up into some, small, well, I shouldn't say small, some deeper convection, still small compared to the big storms that are out west. But I just wanted to show you some of your satellite data from yesterday, some high clouds moving over parts of Georgia. Now, overnight, sun rising this morning to a lot of cloud cover in the Carolinas. We have a mid-level cloud deck underneath of which we have a low-level cloud deck. And notice they're moving in different directions this morning. Kind of just a fun way to see the weather in our part of the world here in the southeast. So where's this all going and what should we expect next? Severe weather threat stays in the central part of the United States. It's going to move into Iowa, Nebraska, Missouri, Kansas, and stretch all the way down to the Red River Valley of the South. And we're watching as these storms just continue to pull through that area. But take a look at your region. We're not expecting this front to make it to us. So while there's always the chance of just an afternoon shower that pops up on the heating of the day, you can kind of see a little bit of that, all the way through midday Saturday, that front doesn't get here. All the action remains here in the central U.S. primarily because of a large area of blocking high pressure. And the question is, how long does the pattern stay like that? Because getting into Saturday's severe weather outlook, it's back in the central United States. Sunday, it's approaching the Mississippi Valley, but we don't see this continuing into the southeast as we go forward. So to show you it on the high-res models, we can play this relatively quickly because there's not a lot coming into our area. Possibly later today, some lighter rainfall coming over the Appalachian Mountains and Blue Ridge Mountains here, but that's about it. Not a whole lot to be talked about. This is through Saturday morning, getting out here until Saturday afternoon and evening, playing through Sunday morning. The high pressure just kind of keeps things protected through the middle of the day while these next two systems roll up the midsection of the country. We're going to be warm because of this, but I'll let you know there's some cold air tucked in on the backside, and we could even get some more snow into the front range of the Rocky Mountains out of this pattern as well. So here's what you've got. Right now, across AgSouth territory, no hazards on the all hazards weather map this morning, but we're dealing with snow, dealing with winter storm warnings, winter weather advisories, winter storm watches, here. Strong winds again coming out of the southwest into New Mexico, Texas. And here's this morning's severe thunderstorm watch, tornado watch, and severe thunderstorm warnings right in through this area. Okay, take a look at this pattern. Watch the systems dig and then lift. That's what they're going to do. They're not going to get into the southeast. Ridging tends to protect us not only through this weekend, but into early next week, where the storm track rolls across the northern tier of the United States. And I don't really see any large systems playing this out into the first week of May that could be diving into this region. I will make a point to show you that this broader trough that's sitting off the coast here, should it come back closer to the Great Lakes states, this could deliver some cooler air into early May. I'm talking about May 7th, 8th, and 9th. I'm not talking about frost. I'm talking about just some cooler air coming into that time frame. But overall, the pattern through the next 2 weeks is relatively benign for us. Should that pick back up in May, there are some evidence that that should be the case. We'll talk about that more in a few moments, but this is our setup here in the near term. For broader perspective, I want to show you where we've been in the month of April so far in precipitation. And it's pretty clear that throughout parts of South Carolina, but a big section of North Carolina and Virginia have been on the drier side of things. Because of that, we've started to see this area show up on the drought monitor. We've now expanded that region in North Carolina that is under the abnormally dry category. And I was talking to some folks, I was in Virginia earlier this week and talking to some folks that were in North Carolina saying, hey, we need to get some moisture back into place here soon, even though the nice drier stretch has been good overall, just to get some spring field work done and to get the crops planted. But coming back to this, I would like to just state how dry things have been in the Western Plains. And even though you see wetter conditions here in Texas, I want to remind you that this was from one event, 2 weeks ago, and a lot of this is evaporated and is gone. So when we think about this upcoming long-range forecast, some of the early season drought pressure seems to really be hunkered down here in the Southern Plains. And we need to watch what happens in the southeast, because as we talked about last week, any sense of semi-permanent ridging getting into that area is something we need to discuss. So I'll keep an eye out on all of that. Back to the drought monitor, though. I want to show you where the change has come in the last week. So we're going to go over to maps and go to change maps and just look here over the last 7 days. So you can see that drought expansion in this area where we've got this abnormally dry air. You can also see back into parts of Kansas where the storms recently missed, where we're continuing to build drought. But the Corn Belt has lately seen a little bit of improvement. The Corn Belt's biggest concern is that subsurface soil moisture is not very good. And even though we're about to hit this area with incredibly heavy rains in multiple rounds over the next 7 to 10 days, the subsurface soil moisture still needs to recover in this area. Going all the way down to 40 inches, we can see some deficits. So with that all as a backdrop, let's kind of start to walk through the forecast. The European Artificial Intelligence forecast is shown first. I apologize. Normally I like to show my version of this, but some of the data didn't come in overnight. And when I tried to rerun it early this morning, I still was missing some data. So their data service seems to be off a bit, but we can get the information from Weather Bell. Take note, we're not looking at a lot of precip in AgSouth territory. Let's flip to another model, the NBM. Again, very limited on our chances of precipitation while things are very wet in the central part of the United States. The WPC, just another forecasting system. Again, limited on the chances for precipitation here. European model, same scenario. And the GFS, same scenario. It doesn't mean completely dry, but we're seeing limited chances here of rainfall through the next 7 to 10 days. Probability-wise, this is the chance at getting over an inch in the next 7 days. And we're down here in this 10% range. The wettest conditions are clearly in the central United States. We're certainly on the drier side of it. Our chances at staying under a half inch are in the 50 to 80% range. So just to let you know, the pattern is not conducive for us to be wet, at least for the next week, maybe beyond that. I'd like to show you an interesting play between this and the temperatures, because over the next 5 days, while we see a lot of mild conditions, take note of the colder air that's trying to sneak into the northern tier of the U.S. This will be some cold air that will set up once we get out there to May 7th, 8th, and 9th in New England and could drop us away from the warmer conditions we are expecting over the next 7 days. But let's go ahead and have a look at the models and just see when precip could get here. We're going to pick this up today. Again, could get some light rain over the Appalachian Mountains here. Not a whole lot to talk about. High pressure takes over. Saturday, Sunday, the severe weather threat, even into Monday, is still here in the central United States along the Mississippi Valley. We could get, this is next Tuesday, Wednesday. Look at that. I'm rocking back and forth. Next Tuesday into Wednesday. A front could get over us, delivering a chance at some moisture, but not much. We then see by next Wednesday, the rain reinvigorates over the south, mid-south, southern plains, this side of the southern plains at least. And then we could watch for that to try to get over to us. But this is all the way out there around the 4th of May. So that's a lot of days with limited chances of getting moisture. So that's why you saw those drier risks certainly in place. Now that gets us out there better than a week. Let's go look at the week 2 forecast by comparing models here. Interestingly enough, the GFS keeps persistence. It says, all right, what we've had, let's keep. That's wet here and stormy here, drier than average over the southeast. The European model, interestingly enough, tries to bring in a little bit better chance at some moisture once we get past the next 7 to 8 days, trying to deliver a good shot of moisture into that time frame of like May 3rd through May 8th. We'll keep an eye out on that particular range. But the CPC, they're going to update their forecast later today. I imagine they do show up a drier signal here when they do update their forecast. So that's 2 weeks. That was quick because high pressure's in place. Don't see any system digging in or setting up or rolling up the coast. So as a result, we see a drier overall pattern. So let's talk about temperatures. You saw briefly that the temperatures are expected to be warm. This is where they've been so far since the beginning of April. And I updated my map on accumulated growing degree days since the beginning of April. And we're generally about 10 to 20 GDDs above average in April. Overall, the only place that's down is a little bit farther to the south, but that's not too far off average. So nothing really there to talk about. Again, this is from April 1st to April 24th. Frost risk next 7 days stays way out of our area, of course, but we will be talking about that May 7th, 8th, 9th, just risk of some cooler air getting back into this area. To show you the high temperatures, though, over the next 7 days, Friday's a little cool. You know why? All that cloud cover that just moved in. That's what we're dealing with here. But as we get into the weekend, Saturday's back to normal. Sunday, a bit of a warm-up. Monday, quite warm, back up in the mid-80s here. Tuesday, same scenario. Wednesday, a little bit warmer than that. And by next Thursday, we really go toward this warmer trend. You saw it in the European model a minute ago. This is the new day 5 through 10 from the GFS. Still keeps you mild. And the day 10 through 15 is still near average to slightly warmer than normal. But the European model has done better at finding this. Ready? This is day 5 through 10, which gets us out there to May 6th. As I play forward, can you kind of see how the warm anomalies back off? That's that risk in this area, May 7th, 8th, and 9th, of getting some cooler air back into place. Again, not overly concerned about some sort of frost threat for AgSouth territory, but just want to keep an eye out on that time frame for a cool down. Okay, that gets us quickly here to the longer range. And this is the newest European model forecast for the month of May. It's got a bit of a persistence bias in it. Can you see that? It's trying to keep you what you are over the next 2 weeks. It just keeps it around, drier than average. Storms here. The GFS is even more with this. It's still trying to keep this area drier with the bigger storms back into the plains. And we just have to question if persistence is the right forecast. Whoops, sorry, I didn't want to show you that. Let's skip that. And you've already seen this, but let's get on to the forecast from the CPC. They're not buying it. They're actually suggesting that once we get past the first week of May, we start to see better precipitation moving into AgSouth territory, which would limit the risk of there being any early season significant drought development. And I believe a lot of their forecast is coming primarily from history. Now, they use all the models. They use everything available to them. But I think if you look at all those years where there was an El Nino in the winter that faded in spring and was gone by summer, we just tended to have better moisture on average. So right now, no alarm bells ringing for me to tell you to be on the lookout for early season drought stresses. I know it's been dry, as of late. That's why we looked closely at this earlier. But it does not seem as though I can give strong evidence that you're going to just take off and stay very, very dry beyond the next 10 days when we're not expecting much precipitation. So where do we take it from here? Well, let's go back to this, going to the analog years, and going back to a map I've shown you many times. This is my summer forecast based on history, and I used every year where there was a El Nino in winter that faded to La Nina by summer. We tended to be hot. We tended to be above average, mostly warmer overnight lows. And I've told you multiple times I've been concerned about drought risk in one of the 3 areas identified. The farther that drought risk goes to the west, the more chances we have of those ridge-riding storms before the active hurricane season gets here. Now, scenario number 3 is the one most concerning. And primarily there's one year that I'm worried about, and that's 2016, which would make scenario number 3 one of the driest. But that's a bit of a rarity in all of this, and we certainly do not have the same conditions this year as we did in 16. It's close, but not perfect. Last week I told you about 2020 as an analog year. This week I want to do something entirely different. This is the analogs. This is what the models are suggesting. Both the European model, the National Multi-Model Ensemble, the CPC, the IRI, all are doing the same thing, and it's shown here. This is the CPC's version, May, June, July, wetter. As we go from there into June, July, August, wet and stormy. They're trying to build drought in the plains, in the Rocky Mountains. And we've known that this has been the picture painted by the models and now by our government. But I want to offer up one other possible solution. And we'll just keep building on these ideas together. That solution is shown here. From 1990 to 2023, if you look at that entire 33-year time frame and compare it to historic averages, over that time frame, the atmospheric pattern has actually favored block flow here, a high over a low that sets up in the western U.S. and western Canada. The Bermuda high has been a bit stronger and pushed farther to the north. And the consequence of this particular pattern, has been to give us a precipitation regime that looks something like this. Over those years, looking at anomalous precip, this seems to be the corridor over which we tend to keep things quite wet. Now, I know you're looking at this going, wait a minute, I see a dry signal across big acres in AgSouth territory. That is there. This is real. And that's because when you get flow like this, the Appalachian Mountains can actually turn into a bit of a rain shadow. But this is what happens when you block up the west with a high or a low. So there's your high. The flow has to come over the top of it, and it cascades down like this, and some of it gets pulled around the backside. None of the forecast models are predicting this. None of them are. None of them are showing that feature. But remember, these forecast models are imperfect, very much so imperfect. And if we look at history, it would say that we likely, if you just predicted this based off the past, we would more likely see a pattern like this than anything else, based only on past, nothing else, not on El Nino, La Nina, not on any information, just looking historically at what is favored, this would be the case. And in that particular situation, I'm not worried about excessive heat in long duration throughout summer for you. And I'm also not worried about the risk of major drought development if the longer term persistence hangs on. Now, you know the models are wet for you. But this is just another way to look at it. You've seen my analogs, you've seen the models, you've seen the what-ifs, this being the big what-if. The big concern I have with this is look out west at the NDVI values. I chose all these western states. They're currently at the highest vegetation health, normalized difference vegetation health values that I've ever seen. What that means is there's a lot of growth, grasses, shrubs, forests. And the concern here is that should the split flow pattern set up in the west, we would be talking about a major western wildfire season. So I just want to let you know another aspect by which we can examine this. I'm not set on any of this. Are you kidding me? I'm really not. But I want you to see the possibilities so that as the system evolves, nothing catches you by surprise. From here, let's quickly finish up with South America. The rains that are supposed to hit the Safrinha crop late in April into early May are gone. The monsoon seems to have slowed down significantly and early across about 70% of Brazil's Safrinha acres. It's flooding in southern Brazil and Argentina and Paraguay, Uruguay. But in through this area, very dry over the next 10 days. Looking internationally, we can just kind of get a good look at a couple of things like the continued wet weather in the Middle East. How extremely wet it is throughout Indonesia and Southeast Asia, China specifically. Southeast China, not Southeast Asia. That's down here where it's dry. Flooding along the Yangtze and south of it. But one thing I want to point out is these rains coming into Australia are desperately needed because, I'm not sure if you saw this, but recently there's been some huge bushfires down in parts of southwestern Western Australia. We're almost down here at the very tip, and these wildfires have spread a lot of smoke. So I just wanted to bring you up to speed on a couple of things happening internationally. With that, I'm going to wrap it up. I'll talk to you next Friday. Have a great weekend, and we'll see what we can do with this dry weather. Have a good one. Thanks.